Good morning. This is the August 26th meeting of the Municipal Services and Environmental Sustainability Committee. We have quite a few guests in the room. I'll start with the people who will begin the discussion with us. And call to order for the committee, Vice Chair Posh.
Here.
Member Davita Russell.
Here.
And I'm Gail Larson, Chair. We also have Councillor Cobb sitting at the table with us this morning. Thank you for attending. And Public Works Director Klingscale and Planning and Development Director Zanft. So, well, thank you. We have a few people who are around us, but we will get a chance to hear from them a little bit later. Director Klingscale, I'm gonna give you the table or the floor, whichever you prefer, to update us on the traffic studies and the traffic calming installations that have been implemented. Please.
Okay, so initially I'm gonna start off, I'm gonna give Director Zanft the floor because my department is not actually performing the survey of the city.
Okay.
That's being performed through the Safe Streets for Cleveland Heights, and that's under the planning department, and he can update you a little bit on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think Director Klingscale was right to pass it to me from the sense that we're doing some citywide comprehensive transportation and traffic planning, which then feeds into the traffic calming and traffic implementation. So we have two major initiatives going on right now. One is the Safe Streets for Cleveland Heights, the website, safestreets4ch.com. And that is a federally funded through the US DOT program to look at the safety of our streets for all users with a focus on high accidents and particularly deadly accidents. So we've had two public meetings on that, including a public open house that was last Thursday that a number of you attended. We actually had about 45 people from the community, a lot of new faces, which was great. And we're at the point in that study where there's recommendations that are being suggested by the team, our consultant team and us, and that's what that meeting was about. So we hope to post those recommendations soon, and the hope is that folks from the community can weigh in on the prioritization of those recommendations. Ultimately, since this is a federal program, the goal is to get federal funding to implement it, so it's a unique opportunity. However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also think about it in our upcoming budgetary process, particularly on the traffic calming side. We will be, this week, Thursday is a deadline for that same program for a demonstration project. So what we're going to be applying for is some of those recommendations to do on a temporary basis over the next 6 to 10 months. And then test them out, see if they work. And then if they do, then go down and apply in May-ish of next year for permanent installation of those things. And that can range from road diets to retiming of signals to additional signage and sort of everything in between. Parallel or complementary to that, we have through the Ohio Department of Transportation what's called the Heights Active Transportation Plan, and that's a collaboration between us, University Heights, and South Euclid. So we're looking at the three cities together and mostly looking at alternative modes of transportation. So whether it's biking, walking, running, rolling, and how to best connect the cities in a very safe way. And so that's also getting towards the point of recommendations. And similar to the federal Safe Streets for All program, the idea is that once we finish this plan, then ODOT will fund its implementation. So we're always trying to set ourselves up for additional funding. And then just the last thing I'll mention is more locally, we have NOACA, which is our MPO, Municipal Planning Organization, our transportation agency. And we with University Heights have a couple, and South Euclid have a couple of TLCI, which is Transportation for Livable Communities Initiative grants from NOACA to work on the bicycle network and then also South Taylor Road. We had intended to work with or have a project with East Cleveland, but at the time the folks at East Cleveland said they weren't ready to participate, but it seems like maybe they are this year, so we're gonna think about doing that for the fall. And certainly, we're always open to ideas for, and this is really for the public, but if there's any areas of concern where you think there might be a solution that could be funded, whether it's through the city or through another agency, now is really the time to get those comments in before we finalize these plans.
Thank you. So I know you guys have been inquiring with me about the traffic study. So I wanted Director Zampier to kind of just give you guys an overall view of what he's been doing, because he's actually been doing the traffic study. And so what we're doing in Public Works is we're trying to take some of the recommendations for the Safe Streets for Cleveland Heights, some of the short-term recommendations that we are able to do within our department, which may include high visibility crosswalk, some of the short-term recommendations that they have made. We're trying to implement them in-house, whether it be on a temporary basis until the outcome of the formal survey is complete, or whether we've determined through our own speed surveys that some type of traffic calming device is warranted at a particular location. So whereas Director Zamp is looking at the entire city, we're more focused on areas where people have either approached the city and petitioned the city to look at a particular street, or whether we received high complaints from a particular area. Those are the things that the Department of Public Works is currently looking at. So with that, I'll back up just a little bit. The way that we used to address complaints for traffic calming, a resident would come in, they would submit a petition. You know, they have to get a petition from residents on the street. We'd have the police involved, and they would actually do some traffic surveys on the street. They would actually perform some speed analysis of the street, and then they would come to our group and say, okay, speed is a problem on the street, or speed is not a problem on the street. They would do an internal evaluation based on police records and based on the devices that they use to determine if speed is a factor on the street. So with some of the areas that Councilor Larson approached me about in her email, only a couple of them actually submitted a formal petition. And some of them, I think that they may have complained to you guys, but I haven't received any complaints, i.e. like Blanche. I didn't have anything on Blanche, but Blanche was on your list of streets that have complained about speed being a factor. So if you guys, like, I can give you the streets where people have petitioned for some type of analysis. Or do you want me to just go through the streets, Councilor Larson, that you submitted to me?
I'd rather, thank you for joining us, Mayor Sarah. I'd rather concentrate on the streets that I've given you.
Okay.
Those are the ones that I'm aware of that people are concerned about. So if you can just address those in fashion. Some of the people are here that live on those streets, and I did want to have one question. When the city targets a street for a traffic study and they're measuring speeding, how long does that measurement, like, are we talking about that, one of those electronic devices?
In the past, it was one of those electronic devices that the police department had. They would deploy those traffic devices. But recently, or earlier this year, mid-year, we actually acquired some software that allows us to do a faster type of evaluation of the street, of speed on the street. And we're currently working with that software company to set up some items in the software that more fit our needs, i.e. we would like for them to tell us where speeding is a problem on some of the streets, where we may not get complaints, but you can see in the software that there's a definite speed problem. So we're working on them with that software, and we can deploy that software now if we receive a complaint. The Department of Public Works actually acquired the software, but we've allowed planning to have a license to look at it as part of their evaluation of planning, and we've also allowed the police department to have a license to look at speeding. So that's how we could do it now without having the police department deploy those speed cameras or speed devices at certain intersections. But that was the old way that we did it when we received the petitions. But now we can do it a lot faster, and we can look at it over time. So instead of looking at it like for a week, we could actually look at it for over like months or in the past year, we could look at that software. And once it gets to the point that we're satisfied that it's giving us all the data that we need, we're going to share that information with City Council so you guys can look at it as well.
And where does that software abide? How does it, is it in on telephone poles or in police cars or?
It's actually done through cell phone towers.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
The software company actually has an agreement with cell phone companies, and they can, most of your, as you guys know, most of your current vehicles have either some type of mapping in it, or your cell phones actually have some type of mapping in it, and they retrieve the information from cell phone towers.
Counselor Posh.
Would there be any kind of privacy issue with that? Or is all the data anonymous?
It's anonymous data. They don't target a specific person or a specific phone number or anything like that. They just collect the data. It's anonymously collected, and they just collect the data based on the number of times somebody is speeding. It's not any specific person or specific vehicle.
It's pretty remarkable. I mean, that's a pretty great way for you guys to analyze the data.
Yeah. I learned about Big Brother 20 years ago in school, I tell you. It's all coming to pass. Yeah, so yeah, I thought it was pretty remarkable when we looked at the survey, but it is a current tool that we can use, and we decided to acquire the software, and we're gonna use it for our traffic calming. So with the software, it will actually tell us like where on the street somebody is speeding. So some people don't pick up speed till they get to a certain point on the street, whether it's a long distance between stop signs or something. So it'll show us areas on the street that speed occurs, more likely occurs in other areas.
It's amazing. Director Clingsdale, as far as the petitions, are there a certain time period where people can apply and bring in a petition or submit a petition, or is it ongoing that anybody can submit a petition for their street?
Mayor.
Madam Chair, I might be able to answer that. I think the petition process was, I think, initially conceived as a result of our general understanding that this is a city of very strong opinions, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't implementing something that would have, extremely vigorous opposition on a particular block. But I think what came to be is an understanding that not only was the petition process sort of onerous, but additionally, I don't think that it really reflected the need in the city. So the number of petitions that initially came in, one, I think in many occasions, the speeding data that we were then taking a look at didn't really bear out the concern. And so we, had some difficulty with that. But what we, sort of came to realize was that the data is one thing and the feeling of speeding is another thing. And we want to be able to address both of those things. But I think we sort of are of the position right now that it's a good thing to slow traffic down generally. And the reason for that is that we know that it is a whole hell of a lot more likely that you will get a fatality if you have an automobile pedestrian crash at 35 than you do at 25. And in the interest of our Vision Zero goals, we think that it's important to make sure that people have a physical reason to slow down a little bit, no matter whether or not a particular block has petitioned. So I'm not sure that we're gonna go back to sort of a petition model as we're implementing these traffic calming installations.
You'll have better data, right? You'll have more reliable data.
We'll have better data. I think many of the streets that we're discussing where people do feel like there is a large speeding problem, we're finding that that's not actually the case based on the data that we've collected and the data that the software has collected. But I don't know that that needs to be a bar. I don't think that, you don't need to have, 50% of the people going 10 miles over the speed limit or, some other arbitrary number in order to realize that it's a generally good idea to slow traffic down and to make people a little bit more conscientious while driving,
Perhaps around schools and areas where
especially around
pedestrians.
schools.
So we won't be really using petitions too much anymore.
I don't think it makes any sense to go
Okay.
back to that model.
Counselor Pash?
So, it's good that you're analyzing these processes. But I think for the sake of clarity, if you look at the Blanche Road petition as an example, maybe they haven't prepared a petition, but I know they're on the verge of doing so. How does the community get some satisfaction, understanding that, hey, look, okay, well, we've used the software, we've looked at it, and yes, there is no problem, or yes, there is a problem. It seems to me that there needs to be something as part of the process, just so the community knows that, the city did really look at this, and they've come to the conclusion where regrettably it's not a problem, even though you may feel like it's a problem, and we have the data to back it up. Or the issue comes across the other way, is like there is truly a problem, and 90% of the people on the street are going over the speed limit. I'll tell you that's the way it is on Demington when kids are going to school and coming back from school. What can you do, if anything, to solve it? But at least you know that there's a problem.
So a little bit of an answer for that one. I think as the director mentioned, our goal with the software that we're working with now is to get it to a point where it is more directly meeting all of the needs that we have and sort of designing our specific interface and making sure that we've got the information that we want out of the software. And my understanding is that there's the potential for making this data available publicly in a read-only kind of format. And so that's one of the things that we'll be providing to council, but we won't just be providing that to council, is my understanding, is that we have the capacity potentially of providing that data publicly so people can see sort of where hotspots are. They can take a look, maybe if we can get it to work the way we want to at their own area, so they can have a bit more understanding about the data that underlies their concerns. That doesn't mean though, and I wanna make it clear, we all know that driving behavior has changed in the past several years. It just has. I think the anecdotal evidence at this point is overwhelming, despite any other data that we might look at. One of the things that is of most concern to me is people, just blowing through stop signs, blowing through stoplights. The stop sign issue is one in particular that I think that we can address in a different way. It doesn't rely on speeding data. Somebody just rolling through a stop sign and not seeing a little kid crossing the street is gonna be a problem, whether or not they're, going well in excess of the speed limit or not. Just the scale will be different potentially. But having a mechanism by which we encourage actually stopping, as we are all supposed to, at stop signs is one of the things that I'm pursuing. Having the possibility of giving people a bit of a jolt as they're approaching a crosswalk, maybe one that kids frequently cross to get to school, in the form of rumble strips. As I'm seeing, they're actually installing over by the Art Museum in the city of Cleveland. This is something that I'm looking forward to putting in place in Cleveland Heights as well, hopefully this year. In order to make sure that we're doing the things in the places where they can do the most good. Making sure that somebody goes down to 1 to 2 miles an hour at a stop sign is gonna do a world of good for safety for kids getting to school and back and other people crossing the street. It doesn't have to be a kid. And the crosswalk issue, I think, is an important one because we need people to pay attention. The flashing lights are helpful, but they are not a traffic signal in the same way that a red light is, for instance. And we also want to make sure, this is something that I hope that all of you, as you're talking to your friends in the community, encourage them that all of the things that we were taught when we were kids are still applicable today. It is absolutely the responsibility of a driver to drive safely and be aware of the people around them and to drive defensively. But in terms of practical reality, the things that we learned, look both ways before you cross the street and then look both ways again before you cross the street, are still applicable today. So I encourage you all to go out and reach out to your networks and make sure they're doing that. But I know that what we're working on right now is to place some barriers in the road that will encourage people to be a little bit more conscientious too. Absent speeding data, in those situations where we know that everybody should be following the rule, like at a four-way stop sign. It just makes sense.
So there's a block party in Blanche this weekend, this coming weekend, and their intent is to get everybody at that block party to sign this petition to put a traffic table in on that street. So I guess what advice do you have for council and the public when people want to do something and get some satisfaction that it's being looked at? I mean, I don't feel comfortable telling them, well, just wait until this process is in line. I mean, maybe that is the answer. But do you have some suggestions on how we can go back to the public with this information?
Well, one of the ways, so we'll be going to the public too. And I encourage you to amplify our message as we put it out there. But one of the ways that people can continue to communicate their traffic concerns is through our service request page. We have a particular specific entry for traffic concerns on the app and on the service request page. So we still want communication from the public, and we will be tracking the traffic concerns and taking a look at sort of where the public sentiment might be and comparing that to the data. That's different than a petition where you need to get 50+1 on a block or something like that. But we are going to take a look at the traffic concerns that are brought in. And we'll be putting out communications, and I encourage all of you to amplify the city's communications on this.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is, because we have a few people here who would like to hear about any prioritization for their street, if they could just speak for 2 to 3 minutes, if I will call on you and talk about the concern that you have, and then if there's some solution that you'd like to see. Is that all right, Director Klingscale?
That's fine with me.
Alonzo, go ahead.
I live on Blanche.
Alonzo, why don't you identify yourself and then say,
I'm Alonzo Holmes, I'm a precinct committee person in that area. And they speed up and down that street like a racetrack. Sometimes they don't even stop at the stop signs. So I have a question. What is the percentage on that data that you really look at? Is it a targeted number, or how do they figure that out as far as what streets they want to really seriously look at?
We'll look at a street based on the complaint. We'll have a speed analysis done just based on the complaint of the entire street, and it'll tell us where on the street and speed is actually a problem.
Yeah, because I had some officers sit by the house quite a few times. So I kind of figured that they think it's a problem there because somebody sits for a while, and they do catch some people running through stop signs and excessive speed. And you got to figure between maybe 3 or 4 houses. I have 20 children live there. Plus I'm on the corner. Since I've been there since '97, been quite a few accidents. Telephone pole, tree, fence. My concern is if 2 people run the stop sign at the same time and they try to avoid, they're in somebody's yard.
Madam Chair.
Hang on a second, please. Could we consider this a complaint registration or should he email you?
We should go through the app, I think, to go through the app so we have documentation of it and then we'll pick it up from the app.
To access Cleveland Heights? Yes, Mayor, sorry.
And Mr. Holmes' point is well taken. I think the practice of sort of, hearing a complaint from the community that people are speeding on stop signs and, having an officer post up and catch some people, that has a pretty demonstrable positive impact, but the impact is temporary because, everybody knows, no matter how well-staffed we are, and we are, by the way, much better staffed in police than we have been, and we're continuing to work on that. But no matter how well-staffed we are in police, we can't have a police officer on every corner.
I definitely understand that part.
Yeah, and so basically the impact of sort of the enforcement piece is a temporary impact because we'll station somebody there and then people will learn not to, run the stop sign at that corner. But they'll run it, 4 blocks away. And so, basically we're having people move and playing whack-a-mole with enforcement. And so that's why we're looking at things like raised crosswalks, but in the interim, we're looking at things like speed tables and speed humps and speed bumps, even though I know people don't love those, at places like those 4-way stops. Because like I said, everybody should be coming to a complete stop. I know most of us don't. But at the very least, a speed bump will take you down to 2 miles an hour. And that's a whole hell of a lot safer for the pedestrian walking by. And it also gives a chance for people to drive carefully and conscientiously among other drivers at that intersection as well. So look forward to the installation of those things in your neighborhood.
If I can add before we move on, as I indicated initially, I had not received any complaints from Blanche, but that's a perfect example where they may have complained to the police department, and the police department did something about it, but I never knew anything about it because I never actually received a complaint.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Gail. I've got something to display. Which wall would be most convenient on
Probably that.
this floor?
Did you bring tape too?
Yeah. My name's Brooks Jones. I live on Grandview. And the purpose of my presenting is mostly to raise awareness of my perception of the current reality. And then if I have time, what the dangers are. So if you all are familiar with this territory, just let me know and it won't be so detailed. So this is Grandview. Here's Roxborough, and this direction is south. And Grandview, as you may know, runs between Cedar and West St. James. Roxborough's here, the city parking lot is here. Here's the grocery outlet and the Heights Medical building and parking area. Over here is Cleveland Heights' new lot that used to be Sal's. Here's the Firestone building, and here's the little lane Cecil that comes into Grandview. On Grandview, there are 2 speed limit signs that state the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. One's at the south end and one's at the north end. There are 2 signs that post no trucks. One is near the speed limit sign at the south end, and one is near the speed limit sign at the north end. This no truck sign is obscured by a tree, and so that's the lay of the land. Cars park on the east side of Grandview. There's 24/7 parking allowed here up until about the city lot in Cecil, and then 24/7 parking is not allowed as we go down here. So the realities of Grandview, it's a cut-through street. People getting to the grocery store when there was one and is soon going to be one. And it's a cut-through street because it's convenient just to get from West St. James to Cedar and vice versa. There's a lot of traffic, both truck and car, And amongst that traffic are people that speed like crazy. There's a lot of speeding. Adding to the difficulty is that if you have a driveway that empties where you come onto Grandview from this side of the street, your vision is really impaired by the cars that are parked here. And you've got to be really, really careful when you're backing up that you're not running into a biker or oncoming traffic. So to me, and there's kids riding to school, walking to school, runners, bikers, all the things that happen in a nice, healthy neighborhood. The flashpoints, in my opinion, are the fact that Roxborough is here and the fact that the grocery store is going to be here. The traffic is most likely going to increase. And there are no controls currently to enforce the speed limit or the truck traffic on this. So one of the first and probably easiest recommendations would be for the city to determine whether or not trucks are or are not allowed. It's posted that they're not allowed. I've made calls to the police and fire department, and no one really knows what the lay of the land is. So that would really help. If no trucks are allowed on Grandview, that would greatly aid to the safety of that street. Because the grocery outlet is going to need to be supplied, it would be logical for them to use Grandview as a way to get to here. But Sal Russo and the grocery outlet people in their planning have focused on the access for loading and unloading to take place with the Cedar Road entrance to Grandview, the Belfield Road access to the parking lot, and trucks going through the parking lot to access the loading docks here. I don't know enough about their plans to talk about it more, but they've been talking about it a lot. So if it could be possible for truck traffic to be limited to this area at the city lot and north between it and Cedar, that would be a really big step to improve safety. Currently, there's a washed out crosswalk between the city lot and the grocery store. You can tell if you look hard that there used to be a crosswalk there, but that's something that Sal Russo is adamant about participating in to getting a very high visibility, safe crosswalk happening for customers that are gonna park at the lot that are gonna be visiting the medical building in the grocery store. Up here, it's pretty much a no-brainer because people are speeding on this. The kids that are walking to Roxborough, whether they're on Grandview or West St. James, they're in jeopardy, and speed needs to be controlled on this street. You guys would be the best source of ideas on how that could be done.
Thank you, Brooks.
That's my piece.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Does he need to put in an access to the Heights request on that service request?
I would say for record purposes, yes, to put in a request through the app, but also Director Zam, I guess he could look at more information about any plans that they have with the supermarket. I could look at the no truck or the 2 no truck postings and whether no trucks are actually allowed on that street. But I would say for record purposes to make sure you put it in through the app,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you. Anybody on this side else that wants to speak? Go ahead, sir.
My name's Philip Wahey. I live on Harcourt Drive. And I don't know where to start. I'm new to the neighborhood. I bought the house on Harcourt early 2020.
Excuse me, Philip. I'm on a time crunch, so if you could just, because you so succinctly told me your concerns about that speed table that went in there, the temporary one. Can you address that so we can discuss that? I think that's really good information to have.
I started in this process of March of this year with Danny Williams, with Colette also. All that time, and actually the process started in 2021 in October, and Eric, I think you were part of that initial meeting. Finally, just maybe 10 days ago, a temporary speed table was put in. Temporary, most speed tables around here are actually asphalted into the roadbed. It's about halfway on Harcourt. If people don't know, Harcourt is suffering from the same problem that Grandview suffers from, except that it is a wide boulevard where no one parks. So people are allowed to speed, and they do. They come off of North Park and they blast down to Cedar. This speed table that was put on, it's temporary, it's been loaned, I understand. I don't quite understand that transaction. It has to be quantified how well it's working. It would appear anecdotally that we need more speed tables. It is certainly changing people's behavior, but it hasn't changed the volume because the root cause has not been discussed in terms of why are so many people coming off of the Heights from North Park to Cedar via all those streets, Grandview, Delaware, Harcourt. It's a concern. So transparency, communication, sense of urgency, I don't get much of that in this process. And I'd like to see more because it's not a big problem. But when you have a blind wife who can't cross the street because traffic is so fast, it's very scary, and there's little kids. So I would hope that this start, as my mother used to say, starting is the hardest thing. We've got to start after 3 years. Can we move this forward, leverage the contract that I think has been signed with a civil engineering firm to get some expertise to quantify what's going on and how can we solve, at least in the near term, problems on this street and other streets off of North Park. Is that
Thank you.
succinct enough?
Thank you very much, Bill. Appreciate it. Director Klingscale, because we do already have that speed table on Harcourt, is that one that is already targeted for you to
Yes, it
take a look
is.
at?
Yes, it is. And the reason that we have the speed table is on loan is because we started looking at this when we first got the complaint before we had budget or anything for speed tables. So we had worked out with the planning department to get some speed tables on loan, and that was one of the first places that we identified that we would put one. In addition to the speed table, some things do take longer. We have a contract underway where we're going to be doing some work at the corner, at the intersection of North Park and Harcourt. That intersection is very wide, and we've noticed that people speed coming down North Park and they speed making that turn onto Harcourt. So we're going to narrow that intersection. We're going to move the stop sign, relocate the stop signs, and then we also noticed in our evaluation, we're going to trim some trees in that area, and hopefully that will slow traffic down that's coming off of North Park going on to Harcourt. And the temporary speed tables, eventually we will get where we're going to install permanent speed tables with the asphalt. But as the mayor indicated, sometimes there's a perception of speeding where there's not actually speeding. So while we evaluate, we're going to be putting up temporary speed tables and moving speed tables around to determine the effectiveness of putting a permanent speed table in those areas.
And it's my understanding that as it gets closer to winter, you'll make some kind of adjustment on that particular speed table so the snowplows don't damage it?
Right, because we don't currently have any speed tables in the city. Of course, this will be an adjustment for our plow drivers.
Yeah.
So, we have to get them acclimated as well to operating in a city where there are numerous speed tables. So that'll be all part of the process. So right now, we can remove that speed table,
Unscrew it.
Yep, unscrew it. But eventually our staff will become a lot more cognizant of it with the signs and don't know where to lift their the blades and everything up and it won't be where we have to remove them during the winter time.
Thank you. Any questions? I have one question, it's about budget. We budgeted $400,000 for traffic calming for this year. It doesn't seem like we've spent quite that much. So will you be just carrying that over and asking for more next year?
Yes, we will be carrying it over, anything that we don't spend. One of the things that I actually met with the finance director about last week, that she's gonna bring forward to the finance committee, and also that I want to discuss with council is the way that you guys allocated that money, you allocated it all in equipment. But there are speed calming, traffic calming measures that we're undertaking that don't involve equipment. For instance, like what we're doing at the intersection of Harcourt and North Park. That's actually construction. So we're getting some work done there. I took it forward to the finance director and she was like, well, you can't spend that money out of this budget because it's equipment. So she's gonna be coming to you with an adjustment for that, but I want to make you guys aware that it can't be all equipment. It has to be like capital or something like that going forward
Okay.
as well, because there are areas that we have to spend making capital improvements. And we can't store all that equipment.
No.
And especially when we start doing the permanent traffic calming measures, the permanent speed tables, that's all capital improvement construction, where you're lifting an asphalt speed tables and stuff at crosswalks or what have you, that's out of asphalt and not a temporary device. And another thing that we're doing that I've discussed with our staff, and we've discussed it in meetings with the mayor, is that as part of our road program, when we look at areas that have speed issues, that we're gonna look at doing some type of traffic calming that's related with our road program.
Makes sense. Does make sense. Yes, Councilor Bosch.
So this installation on Harcourt with the speed table really sounds like it's a great first step. Are there, and I sort of implicitly think that there's other speed tables that are planning on going in. Do you have locations of those? Is Lee Road one of them?
Right now, I think Lee Road, we're looking at Lee Road at Kensington, near the mini park.
There are three. So
There are
we're
three
looking-
areas that
looking- Basically, we're looking for either speed tables or raised crosswalks eventually at the corner of Kensington and Lee, at the crosswalk at the mini park over by the CVS, and in front of the Heights branch of the library, to provide a bit more of an understanding that cars need to slow down as they approach those crosswalks. So that's one of our priorities right there.
Is this a 2024 priority, a 2025 priority?
Well, I think the construction is likely not going to be able to take place in 2024 on the permanent sort of raised crosswalk, which also has the impact of assisting with, making the crosswalks more accessible as well, for people with mobility issues. But I don't think that we've got the timeframe for 2024 construction, but we may be able to implement some, again, temporary pilot projects over there that achieve at least a similar goal.
And another area that we've identified that we will be putting a temporary traffic speed table in is on South Taylor between Monmouth and Fairmount.
I'm gonna move on,
Okay.
but I do know I have a few more locations like Woodview, Cadwell, Hampshire, where someone was injured last year, Coventry, the ped crossings where people are parking. If I just re-ask about those, will you give me an update on where they stand in terms of what you're thinking? And then we can move on to our next agenda item. I would like to do that.
Okay.
Thank you for coming today. Thank you.
And actually, Madam Chair, one last thing that I'd like to leave the people with. Grandview, I think, is a good example of what can occur, and I think Coventry throughout the business district is another example of sort of a naturally occurring traffic calming system. And that is on-street parking. On-street parking actually does have the impact of slowing cars down. One thing that people don't recognize though is that on-street parking also sort of almost paradoxically has the impact of increasing the perception of speeding. People think that cars are going faster on a narrower street than they actually are. This sort of change in perception is something that we have to figure out how to manage. And it might be that we invest in more of the signs that clock people's speed so that the people around them can see that the vehicle's going 26 and not, 32 down a 25 mile per hour street. So I think in that case, we're also looking at the provision of on-street parking as sort of a natural remedy for the speeding behavior that we're seeing in some instances.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming and sharing with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna move on to the Aparto group and your presentation, please.
Excuse me.
We have some handouts for you today.
Thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
Heather Gray again, with the Aparto Partnership Executive, and I have Justin with me today. Eric is in Canada. Justin is part of our project management team, so he'll be supporting the efforts here. Should the project move forward, he's currently on loan to me from Cuyahoga Falls, where they're doing a major project at the natatorium. So he's here to answer technical questions, but if there's a specific question on the scope items that here I don't have clear knowledge on, we will be happy to follow up with Eric and get back to you on this one as well. Okay. So one of the things we talked about at the last council meeting.
Who's at the
Is
table,
that okay?
please, Heather? Yes.
One of the things we discussed at the last council meeting was providing you with a detailed scope list of everything we reviewed. So we went ahead and put that together for you by building because we felt that, especially for those of you who joined us on the council tours, that was a good way to review it pretty comprehensively. Our approach is to not cherry pick certain scope items, but really to do an overall comprehensive renovation of some of your critical facilities in the city. So you have before you the scope items by building that we were asked to look at, and really do have a lot of the work that would fall under the eligible scope for this type of project. So we're looking at King Park Amphitheater, City Hall and the Police Department, Fire Stations 1 and 2, Cumberland Pool, and last but not least, the Service Center. So before you see a breakout by facility. We're happy to go through those one by one with you, answer any questions. I know Councilwoman Larson, you provided a few questions that you would like us to address. We're happy to talk through those with you guys today, or kind of just walk through the process and answer any questions as we go. Whatever format you prefer, we're happy to take on.
Just real quick question, what is the green?
So the green, because of the conversation of that last council meeting, turned towards ARPA. Towards the end, there were some questions about the eligibility of ARPA funds. We have not done an in-depth analysis, nor are we experts in that field and don't claim to be. However, we do know that one of the key items that people have used ARPA dollars for within our projects has been through any kind of air quality, ventilation, HVAC improvement. And so what we have done for you is at each of the facilities highlighted those items. We feel like that's a minimal ARPA eligible that would fit into what your new consultants is calling bucket 1, which is, there's a nexus between responding to the COVID-19 effects. So wanted to highlight that for you all so that if in the event you needed to, as you have these discussions with the administration, revisit some of the plans for ARPA dollars. We do have a program that could utilize those in at least this minimum way. There might be other scope items that could be included, but we would feel more comfortable handing off the full list to legal and to your ARPA advisors to provide further feedback. What I can say is if there was interest in incorporating ARPA dollars into this program, we are at a point in which design would be completed and invoicing could be completed in order to make your deadlines, so long as we stay on the track that we are currently coming before the council for approval on the 3rd. So that's what you see highlighted there. It totals just about $2 million in air quality improvements at these facilities. But wanted to just give you a very high level look at that in case that becomes a discussion topic in the near future.
Mayor Sarin? I'm sorry. Good. The question for me is, we agreed, or we did the legislation 140-2024 to fund replacing the amphitheater roof, and I assume the skylights would be part of that as well, if they're gonna be up there. But we used ARPA funding for that, so would that be another one that we can just slide over to ARPA eligible, possibly?
For that, I would suggest not. Since we are sort of in progress on that.
Okay,
But and specifically because that particular project, the roof in particular does not provide a substantial sort of savings in sort of the larger universe of the projects that we'd be looking at. It was more a beneficiary than it was a contributor
okay.
to the savings that would help us finance these projects. So we moved forward on that with ARPA because we wanted to make sure that moved forward, and we still, obviously, until council votes, we don't know what council's going to do. So we wanted to make sure that we were moving the things forward that we can. But there's still room potentially to create sort of a collaborative effort between the people that we're working with on that project and Leopardo in order to fold it in if that becomes necessary. Otherwise, it just means that we can use the savings that we are realizing from the other pieces of this project in other ways.
So that could be a function of the contract as you move through the specific scope of work items?
Correct.
All right. Councilor Posh.
Okay, so just, and I'm focusing right now on the City Hall and Police Station, just because I think there's a lot of other complications with the others. I think this is sort of an easy thing. So we have essentially an $18 million contract that we're discussing about recommending to the full council to approve. And at this point, there's really no ARPA component to that at all. So when I look at this particular example in City Hall and the police station, there's 3 items on this list that could be used for ARPA, but I just want to make sure they're already included in the $18 million.
So the $18 million is a savings number. So the way that the legislation is created, it is that there's the cost of the improvements themselves are not likely to exceed the savings. So that's why we went with the not to exceed 18 million, because we conservatively know we have $18 million worth of savings. It does not contemplate any contribution, any ARPA dollar. That's pure savings from this program. And to Mayor Sarin's point, the roof at Kane Park is not a big contributor to that savings pot, because roofs tend to be more costly than they are savings driven. However, they support a lot of the other foundational improvements that we need to do. So that 18 million is in pure energy and operational savings related to the scope that we've reviewed. We've identified in some of your critical facilities about $17.5 million worth of infrastructure that is failing or past its useful life. When we're looking at it in total, all of the equipment, all of the street lights, there's a couple additional things that you, as well as your colleagues when we went on the tours, asked us to take another look at. We're at about 21 to $22 million that we've looked at, that we have a high level pricing on of work that can be done that fits within the statute. So that's where that 18 comes from, to not exceed the amount of the savings can the cost can't exceed the amount of the savings. And so what we're looking at here is approximately that $18 million worth of scope items. So the stuff that's highlighted in green, if we're pulled out of the program and funded in another way, there could be other scope that could be absorbed through
I get
this.
it, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, if I could add a little bit more to that as well. I wanna reemphasize that this is a not to exceed. And so it's not necessarily, an $18 million contract at this point. Now, I say that as preface to this next comment though, is that we've still got a little bit more due diligence to do before we cement all of this. And so what we might find, and if we do find this, we may come back to council. If we find that there are more guaranteed savings than we initially estimate, then we may come back to council and say, council, great news.
Yeah.
There's more savings that we can realize than we initially estimated. And if that's the case, then we will come back to council for a potential increase in that contract amount.
Go ahead.
So my gut feeling is if we already have in the scope of work that totals not to exceed $18 million, these other items, I'd be hard pressed to approve, be okay with, funneling that over for an ARPA expenditure. I mean, it seems like there's other things that we still can do with our ARPA funding that sort of, not that I want to use a money laundering term, but sort of wash the ARPA money to be spent on other kinds of things, such as, I'm gonna use roads again, but I know there's other examples. I mean, these are things that we'd be paying for anyways next year, but if we can just get a design build program with some roads, we can get our roads done, but pay for them with the ARPA dollars this year, which then gives us that road money next year that can be used either for roads or for other things. It just gives us the ability to wash those funds and, use them as the city administration and the council feels appropriate. I mean, and when it comes to this particular conversation, if we already have the $18 million for these other items, I mean, let's just forge ahead with this $18 million not to exceed contract, because this is a great way to finance really all these great items that you guys have really, figured out. That's really gonna give us some energy savings and also solve the aging infrastructure problem we have.
And this whole program is really a balancing act, right? And that's why we take the not to exceed approach, because we have to be very nimble and move very quickly, especially in a post-COVID world with financing. They used to let us hold term sheets for several months, and now we're really lucky if they'll let us hold a term sheet for about 6 weeks. That's really lucky. And so that's why we went with this approach. But it's a matter of assigning the scope item, getting kind of that final pricing related to the scope item, and then the savings that are attached to it. So we know from experience what items are gonna be our quick paybacks and our good paybacks, and which items are gonna just be more burdensome on the cost end of it as opposed to, supplying the savings as well. And so it really is a balancing act of, looking at this comprehensively and how does all the pieces really fit together. And then if there are other, opportunities for savings or other opportunities for capital contribution avoidance, which is allowable under the Ohio statute, which would include things like an ARPA contribution or other capital contribution that's planned in your budget, we can move quickly with those pieces. But to that point, it is, there are certain items that are allocated to each, savings bucket as well.
To further complicate or clarify for both, it's not exactly 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, but something to note is that if we get down the road and we're working with Leopardo on this larger project and we as a city determine that it makes sense to contribute some initial cash right now, possibly in the form of ARPA dollars, to fulfill some of this work. What that does is free up savings for other uses, ultimately. And so if we get down that road, we will still realize the guaranteed savings. It's just that we will have sort of front-loaded some of the expense and reduced the need to use the savings in those particular ways. So it is sort of a fungible sort of resource here if we do decide as a city that we're going to contribute those dollars in this particular way, and it doesn't necessarily restrict. It might even further enhance our flexibility in using other city funds for things like roads down the line.
When you look at this list of projects, hopefully you'll have copies for the rest of council as well.
Yes.
So we're doing second reading on Monday of this, the 3rd of September.
We'll probably end up doing 3 readings.
All right, well, that's good to know as well. That helps me out. Not feel so much pressure. How do you when you've gotten the contract all resolved, do you prioritize projects that might give you more efficiencies more quickly?
Yeah, so we look at this, in several ways. Number one is the savings themselves, right? So we are going to look at those items that have a quick payback and really implement those first. The things that have a smaller cost attached to them, larger, quicker payback. Build up those savings, because there is a grace period, so to speak, before your first debt service payment is due. And what we want to do is build up the savings so that when that time comes, the savings are there to make that debt payment. There are other items that we look at when we're developing a project schedule. One of the wonderful things about working with Leopardo is they have a construction background, and we bring all of those techniques and technologies to the table when we do these types of projects. We'll meet with the project team, meet with all the subcontractors, the trades, and we will go through a full pool planning session. And so that really outlines by scope item, by trade, what exactly will be done and when. And so we're looking at things that are either we're really worried about, they're very critical to get done, things that are seasonally directed. Sometimes it's a priority from the administration or from the council that says, we've just gotten so many complaints on this, can we try to fit this in sooner? And Jess can kind of speak to, we're also at the mercy of lead times with ordering large equipment, so.
Yeah, I mean, so your 100 ton, if you look at the city hall, from the police station, your 102 ton package chiller, not readily available. It's not on the shelf. Even you're sometimes looking at 36-week lead time. So that's something that we're going to push down the road. It's a great energy savings, but unfortunately, it's not readily available. The other thing that we're kind of, like Heather said, we're at the mercy of weather. So we're not going to, pull off a roof when there's 12 inches of snow sitting up on the roof. Kind of things of that nature. So there is a sense of urgency for some things that we do prioritize, the quickest payback kind of stuff, and then obviously there's things that have long lead times that are good paybacks, but unfortunately we're at the mercy of the manufacturers.
And the other item that we also have to take into consideration if the lighting is a part of this program, which we hope it is, because it's a wonderful savings opportunity. It's great for the residents, can help with some of the initiatives you were discussing before us with the traffic safety and pedestrian safety issues, is working with the lighting company. So I know Councilwoman Larson, you asked if we would be working with Illumination Company, which is a subsidiary of First Energy. So the answer is yes. We have experience working with them. Drake, who was with us for the last presentation, call him the utility whisperer, and he has lots of relationships with the folks over there to coordinate that. But again, we would be working with them and urging them along on their time schedule. But we're confident that we can get this project all done for you. I believe the target time is about a 12 to 14 month construction period.
Go ahead, Vice President.
Out of this list, what would you prioritize? And how would you prioritize it?
I mean, walking through it myself, and I'm not an engineer, so their answers may be a little bit different. But there's certainly a lot of work to be done at each of these facilities. We can cover a good amount of it with the savings that are generated through the program. Procurement solutions and the street lighting are our biggest driving forces when it comes to those savings. So they are funding everything else, not everything else, but they're funding a good chunk of the program. So to me, looking at it with my financial cap on, I say those are priorities that have to be included if you really want to get the full benefit of the savings of this type of program. And then from there, there is significant work that needs to be done in a very comprehensive, interconnected approach. The service garage, City Hall, both the fire stations, there's work that can be done kind of piecemeal. But there's some things that really shouldn't be done that way. And so the roofs are That's why you see roofs get to the state that they get to, because they're very costly to redo. But especially the ones where you guys have invested in these solar panel opportunities, you know, I would hate to see that asset crumble and then you lose the asset on top of it as well. So those are some of the types of things that I'd say should be prioritized. But ventilation, all the HVAC systems really, there's great need throughout the city. I'd say that's top of the list as well.
And I might have missed it, so to cover all these projects, what would be actually a timeline from start to finish?
So if we stay on track, you know, with the timeline that we presented, going to council, I think, Addie, did you say you believe it was going to be a third reading on this? Okay, so that'd be the following meeting, 2 weeks from then, most likely?
The seventh?
No, I think the next one is
The 17th?
There's the third and then, oh yeah, 17th.
17th?
Or 16th, sorry.
16th. So I mean, I think is so long as we can kind of stay on that track, one of the things that I'm very mindful of is the financing process. And I know once you start getting into November, you start having more difficulty getting people's attention, getting the rates that you wanna get. So we wanna make sure that we are not pushing the financing to the following year because that will slow down all the equipment ordering. But assuming we are able to close on the financing this year, start pre-construction in November, it's a 14-month construction period. So we will see significant progress through 2025, probably wrap everything early 2026. And that could be a complete conversion of all streetlights, all of these facility improvements that you see here through that period.
Madam Chair, quick
Thank
question about the schedule. It just for my own edification, what is the reason for taking it beyond the normal second reading?
I think we really had just discussed when we were in our meeting with law, just we weren't sure if we were gonna get through all the discussion in this committee today. That's the only reason
It was the law.
that we had expected it, but
So
if you guys do get through it and you guys decide to move forward, then
Well,
I don't think there's any issue with it. It just really depends
possibly
if
the
it's up
other
to you.
members of council may have some concerns that need to be addressed that we didn't discuss here today.
Would that potentially be done in
Committee of the whole.
then? We could,
So we could
if
potentially.
if the council feels comfortable, then we could potentially pass this on second reading if council chooses to
Yeah.
move forward with it.
And I think we need to alert the other parts of council from other members that this is something they need to look at, prepare to discuss it on at that next meeting on the 3rd. And if they have any questions, they can send them to you or to directly, and then you'll get an answer for them.
Absolutely.
Does that work?
And then you probably need to notify the law.
And I could provide the handout that you guys have before you today to Addie electronically so that you can disperse it to the other council members.
Councilor Pacha.
Yeah, I'd very much like to see this pass on the 3rd if we possibly can, if we can get the other council members on board. Giving them this packet, I think was very, very helpful. I don't feel like I need to see the ARPA scope in here, but I do think it's relatively important so we know how much money we're spending per building. Is that, I assume you're just pulling this from a spreadsheet, and if you were to add, for example, the service center, what that total number is?
We can give you an estimate by building right now because costs aren't finalized yet.
Yeah,
Oh, that'd be later, but we can give you a very high level estimate of.
That would be ideal, and the reason I'm asking for that is a little bit more of an equity issue. I mean, we do have people in the community that look at, which areas in the community that we're actually funding and putting money into. I think it looks like it's diverse. You have good diversity in which buildings, what neighborhoods are being assisted with this effort. But I just think it's kind of helpful if we can actually see the dollar amounts.
Certainly that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Cobb, do you have any?
No, I don't, thank you.
I have one last question, so before I go on, Mr. Barber, Mr. Lee, you have a question?
I just wanted to ask, is there an ongoing commitment as part of the contracting process and the implementation process that involves city staff?
Yes.
And has all that been cleared with the department directors that they have the?
So everyone impacted by this, the facilities that we're looking at here have been, in communication with us through different points of this process. I like to refer to it as the project team. I think it's very critical. Typically, as I said, Justin, he's on loan to me today from Cuyahoga Falls, but he'll be heading there right after this. They meet, is it weekly at this point? Weekly
Yeah,
for
so
project
we-
update meetings? And so of any relevant staff, the agenda, we go through it, depending on where we're at in the process, they're at a critical point over there. And so they are meeting every week with our project team. But it is a very high level of communication between us and the staff and coordinating that. And even following the implementation, some of these systems will be new. So there'll be a training aspect as well. We want these equipment systems to be up and running at their maximum capacity, operating at their maximum value at all times. So it's important not only that implementation goes smooth, but the continued maintenance and all that training occurs as well.
Philip, do you have a question? Alonzo? Alright, I would like to know more about the funding mechanism, cause $18 million is a lot of money. So I'd like to know, can you explain to me how that will work, please?
Well, I'll tee up Ms. Garay on this, but the idea is basically the state allows for this and restricts this particular mechanism for funding this kind of improvement. One of the restrictions, of course, and we wouldn't be having this kind of conversation if this wasn't the case, but one of the restrictions is that the ultimate savings needs to be backed up by an investment grade audit and guaranteed for the beneficiary of this program. And sort of that's the backstop no matter how we choose to finance this process. There are some possible avenues for financing that are slightly different that we'll sort of have a conversation with Leopardo down the road about the specifics, but Ms. Garay can add a little bit more context to that.
Thank you, Mayor. So it can be financed as your traditional construction, project with a traditional bond, tax revenue bond, any other sort of revenue bond. But the wonderful thing about this statute that it allows for the savings to pay for the improvements themselves. So that is done through typically an installment contract or an annual appropriation note, in which you partner with a company like us that, as Mayor Zirin said, is guaranteeing the results. And then those savings are then utilized to make the debt service payment. You're only pledging the savings. You don't have to pledge tax revenues. You don't have to tie up your bonding capacity because they exempt it from being true debt on your books. And it's a unique setup because of the guarantee. And so if we guarantee a X amount of savings and we fall short of that, there is a point in which we would have to write you a check for that payment. So it provides that additional protection for you and for the lender, and knowing that the debt service payment is going to be made. So that's typically what we look at. We've had some instances in Cuyahoga Falls actually is an example of a different way. They typically do one major bond a year, and they wanted to incorporate some of our program in that and some of it done through an annual appropriation note. There's different ways to do it. We're always happy to look at those different ways. But at its core, this is used as a way to make improvements within your facilities without tying up any other dollars, but the savings you're going to realize themselves. So I always feel that's usually the best place to start, but we will, when working through the financing solicitation, provide that feedback and take a look at different terms and different options. But as I said, part of the reason going for this not to exceed number is because we have to move very quickly and be very nimble in this current market.
Yes, go ahead.
So I've made a couple assumptions and maybe I shouldn't have made those assumptions. So here's some questions. So initially, as I understand it, this does not change our bond capacity at all.
Correct.
But would it impact any of our credit ratings?
I've seen these require a rating. Most of them do not. It won't impact it in the sense that there's no overlapping debt with it if you structure it that way.
Okay.
So it will be reviewed. You have to report it annually, just as you do any other type of lease payments. It's just not considered true debt for tying up your bonding capacity. So if you were to, realize the savings and not make your debt service payment and default on that loan, then yes, of course, it's going to have a negative impact on your rating. But it's really just added to the equation upon
And this-
annual reporting.
And this is a 20-year plus loan.
So the statute allows you to go up to 30 years, not to exceed the useful life of the equipment itself. You're not gonna get a bank to go out 30 years right now. Typically, we see these financings go out 15. We like to structure them that way so that you get some time where you're just reaping the benefits of the savings themselves without a debt payment. Most of the equipment here is 20, its lifespan is 20 plus years, so it's covered there. Depending, utility projects where you're talking really major equipment, sometimes can go out to a 20-year term, but you're usually gonna see a better rate at about a 15-year. But we always do work with the lenders to make sure that you can refund them after a period of time. So if interest rates drop and you want to go back and refund that debt or do another phase, like I did in my community, we actually realized more savings and wanted more work to be done. So the rates were better during phase 2 than they were for phase 1. We were able to refund that original debt with that and get better interest rates throughout, and then that could theoretically extend the life of the financing.
Well, I think we have to assume that the rates are gonna go down, probably go down relatively soon.
Mhm.
What about your bond? So because if you're backstopping the savings, so if you don't get the savings, therefore we can't make our payments, we have to turn to you. Do you guys have a bond in order to for us to capture those monies from your organization?
So the underwriting process is unique here because we are guaranteeing that payment, the savings that will be then used for the payment. The lender is really underwriting both us as a company financially as well as you as Stability as the city. So that part is taken into consideration. We have worked with some places in which they wanted to have basically a savings bond put in place for that additional fee, that you basically have a third party that would oversee that and ensure that any payments were made. We try to be very conservative with our approach. That is why we typically see about 120% savings growth from even the point we are at now to the IGA phase, our investment grade audit phase, where we're really narrowing in on the details. And so you're typically going to see more savings than less. We've not actually had to write a check yet. And all of those surplus savings go to you as a community to do what you'd like to do with them.
Do we have an owner's rep relationship with anybody, someone to represent us?
We have had owner's rep relationships in the past. We don't have an ongoing owner's rep relationship with any particular contractor right now.
Do you think it makes sense for us to engage an owner's rep as this gets approved and as we walk through all the various financial steps, which I'm certainly not an expert at, and I'm not sure we are as a city because this is not something you do every day. Does it make sense to have an owner's rep represent us as we're going through the financing?
I think probably not as we're going through the financing. I don't think that we would want an owner's rep. We might engage with some outside counsel or engage with some people from Retzel to assist in our internal sort of process here. But when it comes to the financing, no, the owner's rep process would be more for making sure that we've got somebody who is sort of has a almost a fiduciary duty to us with regard to the construction process. And so we might, depending on the complexity of any particular project, engage with an owner's rep just to keep our interests top of mind. But I think that might be sort of a case by case specific to the construction project that we're looking at any given time.
And we do, for point of clarity, we do carry builder's risk insurance. We do have all of the construction insurances in place, bonded and insured for all of the construction and performance aspect of it. We kind of act almost as your owner's rep in this program because we are managing all of your subcontractors. It is a discussion that I've heard other communities have before. And if there was interest in doing a separate policy outside of our contract in which it would be to, basically do a third level review of the savings analysis and ensuring that we can certainly have discussions on that with you guys as well.
Well, my number one issue is 20 years down the line. So we have a successful project until year 20 where the savings aren't aligning with the amount that we owe on the remaining balance of the notes. And we have to turn to you folks to honor your guarantee. I mean, that's my concern. I mean, we're 20 years down the road. I mean, none of us are gonna be at this table at this time. You know, what recourse do we have? And this is where I think we need to have Retzel or whoever you're gonna, whatever firm you're gonna, you know, paper this deal for us, you know, review. So that's my only concern. I assume we're gonna go through the due diligence and we're gonna be protected. So,
Well, I think, you know, in many of the deals that we do, we've got contracts that span and requirements that span, you know, more than 20 years. Some of the work that we've done in economic development, we've got 30-year expectations. And I think, you know, we're sort of practiced, and I think the city has practiced that. You know, it's certainly at this point probably a bit more with keeping track of those things long term. Now, I don't know that your concern is completely unfounded or anything like that, but so I appreciate you bringing it up. And I'll make sure that we address that as we work through sort of the contracting with Leopardo.
Is there a penalty for paying off early?
That's also something we include when working with lenders, making sure that there's no prepayment penalty and there's the ability to refund or refinance that debt after a certain term. Usually we see that anywhere from 2 to 7 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the committee at this point what your views are on moving forward or not moving forward. Send it back to committee of the whole.
I think we can, I'm fine with moving it forward. I think probably send it back to committee of the whole just in case any other council members have any questions or anything and ask for a possibility of passage.
yeah, I agree.
So just for a point of clarification on that, so would that be again like the last meeting where it was prior to the six PM meeting?
Yep.
I was there.
Yep.
Oh, at the 6 p.m.
At the 6 PM
At the
meeting,
6 p.m.,
yes.
Not prior to.
Not prior to,
We
no.
wouldn't be in here
No.
talking to an empty room.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're traveling from out of state. I mean, I'm not necessarily sure we actually need their company to be present. I mean, you may be available.
My boss is gonna send me anyway, so
Yeah.
don't you worry about it. This
Well,
is a big deal and we wanna make sure we're
Okay.
available to answer your questions.
Okay.
Yeah,
I do
Eric, I think
appreciate that
I
though.
think Eric should be back by then as well, so.
Yeah.
And he's local to
Okay, that's,
Cincinnati.
One of the phrases that I heard from Heather when I took the tour, which again, I very much, it made this hands-on, you know, you could see where the needs are, especially in the service area when the exhaust is bellowing around the people. She called it a legacy project, and I really believe that with all the maintenance issues that they've revealed, it's really important that we move this forward to committee of the whole and that our other council members come along with us and that we hopefully can ask for approval on the 3rd. So as that's where the committee stands at this point. Right?
Well, I will make sure that Addie has a copy of this that we covered today, and if there are any other questions the committee would like us to answer prior to that time, please feel free to reach out to me directly, or through the mayor's office, however you'd like to do that. We'll be here and we'll be happy to answer any further questions, but we are very excited to see this move forward. We think it is a great program. Like I said, I've seen it work, and I think that this community is very similar to my hometown, in which we had a lot of success, and I'd be happy to have another community that we can walk into and say we partnered with on these improvements. So great. Thank you.
So I'm going to adjourn this meeting 11:24, 26th of August. Thank you all for coming.